Board of Supervisors meeting, Monday, December 20th. We'll begin with the salute to the flag, please. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Item number 1 on our agenda is public comment. Is there anybody here for public comment in person? Do we have anybody else for public comment?
Yes, we have one online. Stand by.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good. According to the budget, we currently make approximately 22 million plus or minus a year from waste management fees. And of that amount, we're using 21 million plus or minus a year. So at some point, when waste management needs to close down their operations because the landfill is actually filled up, we're going to start being in a real deficit because we're using 21 million that we really don't at the present time have a way to replace. So I'm just wondering if we're actually looking into doing something or planning ahead for this, because otherwise our taxes are going to astronomically increase to a point that many residents won't be able to afford to live here. So I was curious if there is a plan in place to address this at some point. And also, as far as the SIV ambulance facility, what will happen to the evergreens that are along both Olds Boulevard and Route 1, because they act as a noise buffer and a dirt buffer from both those roads and also from the railroad that is actually parallel to that property along Route 1.
The railroad on the other side of Route 1, you mean?
Yes.
All right, first, we're going to think, well, we can go back to that during that agenda item. We usually don't take comments on agenda items during public comment. But the other one, other than our long-term savings, yeah, that's why we haven't raised taxes since the 90s. We've relied on the waste management fees. Hopefully with North Point being in place now, and by then, if it ever is over for waste management, increase taxes from down there as well.
All right. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for public comment?
That was the last public comment.
All right. Item number 2, SIV ambulance service and facility.
Dents, this is a conditional use hearing, so if we could have a motion to open the conditional use hearing.
All right, is there a motion to open the conditional use hearing?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Dents, members of the board, this is a conditional use application for SIV ambulance service facility located at 400 Lincoln Highway, Fairless Hills, PA. The tax map parcel is 13-017-01C, 012, the property is zoned 8C Highway Commercial. The applicant this evening is represented by attorney Michael McGinnis. And Mr. McGinnis, as you and I discussed earlier today, and as is the procedure of the township, if you could identify your witnesses, and then if you can give a brief summary of what their testimony will be, ask them to confirm that your summary was accurate, and then make yourself and your witnesses available for any questions from the board.
Of course, very good, Mr. Clark. Mike McGinnis from Begley Carlin here on behalf of Civ Ambulances. I have Vince Fioravani with us, who's our civil engineer, and Sergio Civ here on behalf of the applicant. I will, as Mr. Clark has suggested, my plan is to substantially summarize what Mr. Civ would state if he was saying this to the board himself, and then have Mr. Fioravani do a very brief walkthrough of the plan, if that works. And then, Mike, do you want, well, okay, we'll handle it that way. Yep. As Mr. Clark indicated, The property is located at North Olds Boulevard and Lincoln Highway. It's zoned highway commercial. It's approximately 3.63 acres and is partially improved by a parking lot. So it's inaccurate to say that it's not improved. There is a parking facility there. It shares a parking field with what I'll label to be the Social Security building. The proposal is to build an approximately 30,000 square foot service facility to repair, but primarily to sell ambulances. There was a prior approval back in 2000 which showed a building envelope of 30,000 square feet on this lot, which is essentially the same size and character of what we're proposing tonight. Our proposed process here, and just to orient the board a bit, is we appeared in front of the zoning hearing board and received 2 variances, one for parking setback and one for a building setback. We appeared in front of the Planning Commission for the conditional use application, and we're in front of the board tonight. If we secure approval from the supervisors, we would then go through a full land development process and certainly work with the neighbors and reappear in front of the Planning Commission many months from now and then back in front of the board. So a full land development plan with full stormwater design and all of that stuff is going to be supplied at a later date through Mr. Fioravani's office. This use, it was determined through correspondence with the township. There's, might not come as a surprise to the board, there's nothing exactly that covers ambulance sales in the township. I have not represented an ambulance dealership before. It's a pretty niche use. That was most akin to sales of things like RVs and boats and specialized vehicles, which puts this into the conditional use pot. So just to explain from a housekeeping standpoint, a background of some items here that came up at zoning and then what came up at the Planning Commission and then what came up from some of the resident comments, because we did have a couple individuals who expressed concern at the zoning hearing board, and then I did have a conversation with Ms. Mary Ebersol last week who expressed some concerns, so I just want to work through those to be very candid with the board. Civ currently operates a facility in Langhorne on Big Oak Road. That site is smaller than this site. We're anticipating essentially doubling the size of the operation, going to a 30,000 square foot facility and adding approximately 7 employees. It was questioned at the zoning hearing board, well, is there going to be enough capacity if you're very successful already? And the answer is yes. That's why we're moving out of the other location where we're renting space and hopefully into this location where we're the equitable owners. So we're envisioning that expansion and adding those employees. Civ sells ambulances to a variety of EMS companies. Most of the purchases are done online. As you might imagine, there is no retail component with this operation. You don't have customers frequently driving to the site, so there's very minimal traffic impact. Most of the individuals or entities, I guess, who are purchasing ambulances are doing so online where the ambulances are listed for sale. Typically, what occurs is an ambulance comes to the site, it's dismounted, and then any upgrades, paint repairs if necessary, are done internal, and then it's remounted and sold. Ambulances which are kept for sale are going to be kept in a clean and orderly manner. I think there's been some conversation and confusion both at the zoning hearing board and at the Planning Commission that if we get approval, there's just going to be ambulance parts strewn about in the parking lot. That is not the case, and my client had prepared this rendering to give some conception of what the site would look like if we were able to move forward and secure approval tonight. Sergio indicated to me that they had approximately 4 ambulances the entire calendar year 2020 that were worked on and then kept exterior to the site in some condition where it would be obvious that they were being repaired. Most of the vehicles, the vast majority of the vehicles that would be stored on site are ambulances which are in good condition, which are just listed online and sold to EMS companies both locally and throughout the country. We have 134 parking spaces allocated specifically to our site. There's plenty of parking, and that's accounting for even 30 customer spaces, which of course are never going to be implicated by this use. And then architecturally, you could see, roughly speaking, the building is going to be a similar composition and height. I think actually slightly smaller than the building that is operated by the Social Security Administration. So it certainly fits in from a height standpoint and from a design standpoint with other buildings along the road here. The hours of operation would be 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. That is I would argue, a more friendly hours of operation than a different business that might come in a commercially approved lot. So from a traffic standpoint and from a business operations standpoint, the impact to the residential homes to the rear would be less than similar uses that could come in by right at this property. The Planning Commission had a question about whether the spaces would be adequate for parking purposes, not the number of spaces, but whether the spaces can actually house the ambulances. My client took a number of ambulances to the site, parked the ambulances rear to rear, and there was plenty of room for the ambulances in the parking spaces. We had photographic documentation evidencing this, so they do fit in the parking spaces. It's not the situation where you're going to have ambulances going into drive aisles. And then, as I indicated, most of the ambulances that are going to be stored on site are ambulances that have already been worked on or had some sort of small cosmetic work that are going to be to the exterior. Where the ambulances are stored versus any employee parking, we're certainly happy to work that out with the township and the residents through a land development process, whether there would be a preference that customers and or employee parking more frontal Lincoln Highway or is more to the rear. That can all be worked out, but we're more than happy to continue to engage in dialogue with the residents and with the township as this process moves forward. There were a couple of concerns, there were 5, and we'll hit on these very briefly, that were voiced by the neighbors collectively at the zoning hearing board and then through my dialogue. So one item that came up is, as I indicated, we're trying to be very candid about the process here. A component of this does require potentially painting and refinishing ambulances. So my client testified at the zoning hearing board, and I can affirm again here tonight that he just made a $130,000 investment into a new state-of-the-art paint booth. We provided the specs. That paint booth captures 99.84% of contaminants. It's thoroughly regulated, but on top of that, he is willing, and will affirm this tonight, to have an independent inspector come out once a year to inspect the paint booth, the storage of paint, et cetera. Any reasonable conditions that the township or the residents would like attached to this application, he's willing to work with and to incorporate those onto the site. Any and all paint, there was a question about, any paint that's being used, how is that being stored? That is being stored at the site, all in fire-rated cabinets, which I'm sure will be inspected by Mr. DiPolito's office, and that is not going to be a safety concern. There was a question about whether chromium was utilized in the paint. I didn't know what chromium was, but we've researched it. Chromium is not utilized. This is PPG paint, so from an environmental standpoint, apparently that's a more toxic chemical. That is not something that is utilized in this process, apparently hasn't been for a number of years. There was also a question, and I think Ms. Batiste referenced part of this, about what I'll call the buffer between this site and the residential properties to the rear. We are more than happy to sit down with the neighbors and plant a number of trees along that property boundary to significantly buffer it. So obviously, as we went through land development, we would have a landscape plan, but we're happy to incorporate the township and the residents' desire to buffer that area between the commercial and the residential properties. There was a question that arose regarding noise on the site. This is an ambulance company, and ambulances have sirens. So if I lived on a property that was adjacent, I would have a concern about noise as well. There are sirens that are tested no more than once a day. I said at the zoning hearing board there was siren testing. They are tested less frequently than once a day. The test is completely to the internal of the building, and it lasts approximately 2 seconds. That is the extent of the siren testing at the location. There is a compressor that was discussed at the zoning hearing board. We have documentation indicating that that's approximately 68 decibels, which is the level of an office conversation. So that is not something that could be heard outside of that building. And then the final item that I would like to touch on that came up was lighting. There was a question about whether this would have an impact with respect to light pollution on the residential properties to the rear. My understanding is this site is presently backlit already. This use, because of the hours of operation between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., is going to have a significantly smaller impact, I think, than other commercial uses from a lighting standpoint. And of course, we're happy and will supply a lighting plan to make sure that there's no light pollution or light spillage from this property onto any of the residential properties to the rear. We have tried in earnest to address all of the issues as they come up. I made the representation at the zoning hearing board, and I will make the representation tonight again that any residents who want to come and sit down to discuss this are invited to come to our office. The one item actually, and I will stop in a second, that I do want to disclose is I had sent correspondence out to the residential properties to the rear and invited them to the firm on Thursday night last week to discuss this. We had 2 individuals at our firm who tested positive at the beginning of last week. I communicated with Ms. Ebersol, and in an abundance of caution, we thought for everybody's safety and welfare, we canceled the meeting. And I believe Ms. Ebersol was communicating that to the neighbors. So that was, they might, if someone's on here could say, well, we tried to talk, and we'll take responsibility for that cancellation. But the overture remains open if we proceed past tonight. We're happy to incorporate any reasonable requests that we can. And I think we've tried to be responsive to questions as they've arose during this process. So I know this is an abnormal use at the location, but we think it's a good use at the location. We think it's consistent with the scope of uses that were envisioned previously. We think this is going to have a minor impact on the residential properties, less of an impact than other commercial uses that can come in here. And it's a business that's local, that wants to stay local, and just is looking to expand to a facility that they'll own instead of rent. So that's my summary. And Sergio, if you can just affirm or correct anything that I've said.
Good evening, I affirm.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just have Vince take a minute and walk through it, and we'll open it up for questions. And thank you again for your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Vince Fioravanti. We'll just go quickly through the site plan and summarize the aspects of the project in terms of land development and civil engineering for the construction. As you look at the site, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with it, it's essentially an improved building lot that's been in place for 20 years or so. Looking at the site, you can see the parking lot's already in place, utilities are in place, the grading is complete. There is a stormwater system under the parking lot. There's a surface basin that collects water, and there's also a discharge point on the site. So everything is really in place for this. It's essentially an improved building pad site. So it will be very easy in terms of land development. We will have to look at the stormwater system. It has been in place for a long time, and the regulations have probably changed 10 times since it was approved. So we will have to go through and televise the lines and inspect the situation, in terms of basin size, and make sure it complies with today's ordinances. If we need to, we can, increase the stormwater controls on the site in various locations, and we will have to model that and submit that for approval of local and state agencies. But essentially, in terms of buffering and landscaping, we'll look at that. We show some evergreen buffering along the driveway. This would be proposed buffering that we would supplement. There is evergreens in that location at this time. Some are in better shape than others. There are some sparse areas that we would supplement with additional landscaping and planting. Again, landscaping and buffering is an existing nonconformity in terms of the ordinance. It requires 25 feet, and there's a 20-foot buffer there. There were also some other nonconformities with setbacks that we received variances on. But, of course, we would take into account landscaping, buffering, lighting with the adjoiners, and there wouldn't be any negative impacts as far as that's concerned. There was a concern at one time in one of the meetings that if an ambulance were being brought in, that was being brought in with a tow truck, and we're told it doesn't happen very often. Then how will we get in, with the backing up and the vehicle maneuvers and the traffic and not impact the access to the other business on the site? And this exhibit shows a yellow widening. It might be difficult to see at this point, but it's a place where we could easily widen the existing driveway from its current 20-foot to 30-foot so that we could have a truck come in or a tow truck, and it could pull into the widened area that would be hatched and out of the way so that they could maneuver the ambulance into the overhead doors at a time when there was no one using the driveway. So it's very easy to accommodate with a slight entrance modification. I think we can make all the vehicle maneuvers, and we'll have truck turning templates with the township engineer. But otherwise, I think the use is compatible, and I think it would be very easy. As you can see from the site plan, the building mimics with symmetry, the building on the other side of the parking lot. So I think it's a good use, and I don't think there'll be any negative impacts in terms of land development or, physical construction.
All right, thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
You have anything to add, Mr. Clark?
I do not. It'd be appropriate if any members of the board have any questions for Mr. McGinnis or his witnesses.
Okay.
And then perhaps Mr. Jones may have some comments, and then ask for comments from members of the public. So,
Mr. Palmer, any questions or comments?
I'll wait for my comment.
You slide that over back.
Mr. Galloway?
None at this time, thank you.
Mr. Boraski?
Sure. One of my questions is start with the board we just moved. Is the parking lot, by any chance, is it split in half, or how do you count parking spaces? Is it for Social Security gets so many and this building would get so many?
Yeah, so there's a reciprocal easement agreement that's in place between the entity that operates the Social Security building and BET, who owns this lot presently. My understanding is when the entity that owns the Social Security building came through, the township gave them approval with the understanding that their physical lot actually is underparked. So their count consisted of utilizing a number of spaces on our proposed property. So when you look at the number of spaces we have allocated, there's actually more than 134 spaces on our property. But again, we want to be transparent, and we don't want to come in front of the board and say, well, we have 100 and whatever the number is, 150 spaces, even though we technically do on our property, because we want to be good neighbors to the Social Security building and not create a non-conforming condition on their site. They got approval that was premised upon utilizing a certain number of spaces on our site. The balance left over with our proposal would leave 134 spaces for us.
Okay. My next question, we're going back to the zoning hearing board. What was the setback for? What size? Was it on the Lincoln Highway side? I'm just curious, that's a big buffer. How much of that buffer are we taking away? Because I'm trying to, it's hard to judge there if you're not seeing the streets on that.
Of course.
view.
So both of the variances that we received were, I'm sorry, can I? There we go. We received a setback to permit this building to be set 75 feet back from Lincoln Highway, which mirrored the Social Security building, and it was a variance that was previously granted by the township but had expired. And then we received a variance right here to have a closer than permitted setback from our parking in that area. And that was, again, to try to gain additional parking spaces to offset the fact that the Social Security building was utilizing some of the spaces in our parking field. So those were the two dimensional variances we received. Nothing with respect to any impact on the residential properties.
All right. And did you have copies for us tonight of the pictures of parking ambulances, or no?
I'm sorry. I supplied those via email to the township, but I can supplement and supply those certainly. I don't. Did
No
you?
big deal.
I have it on the phone, but.
It's no big deal.
Yeah. I can make the representation. There was about and we have a electronic version,
Okay.
but about I would say a 2 to 3 foot, 4 foot separation with the ambulances parked fully in the spaces back to back, a 4 foot gap, because we're fortunate enough that there's islands between the parking spaces, so we can park them back to back, and really the difference in the length of the ambulances comes from the back wheel to the back portion of the ambulance, but we have the overhang in the green space that can compensate.
That's all I have.
Ms. Mullin?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. That was a really great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
So, do you sell ambulances right now?
Yes.
Do you sell them out of your other location?
Correct.
Okay. And this was in the presentation, but I just need it repeated, I guess. At the proposed new location, what percentage of this business is repair and what percentage is sales?
So I think the breakdown would be, 85% sales, and then the 15% would be, collision and repair.
And then same question for the building. I'm just trying to get an idea, is the building going to look like a typical car sale building with glass doors and ambulances inside, or is it mostly a mechanical shop?
It's mostly like a warehouse, right? This is just conceptual right here, so we don't have a retail, aspect where the ambulance is actually parked inside, like a showroom. Our showroom is basically outside in the parking lot, so we want to make it as clean as possible.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Most of my questions were answered. On this drawing that we have, is this one? You can hear me, right? On the drawing that we have, there's a secured vehicles lot, it looks like. Is that fenced in? What's going on in there?
Yeah, so there, we are restricted because of the REA agreement to substantially modify the parking area. So there was a conversation came up at the Planning Commission about whether we could fence in an area in that parking lot. And we were engaged in conversations with our prospective neighbor about doing that. And their initial feedback this past week, after the plan that we were hoping, we could show up in front of the board tonight and say, great news, our neighbor has agreed to this, was not agreed upon, to be candid. So we're trying to come up with a creative way that to basically, whether it's natural buffering or screening or something we can do so that if we have a circumstance where there's two ambulances that are being worked on, and again, none of the work to the exterior, but are being worked on and stored on the outside, that they can be shielded in some way, and we're working through that process. I haven't given up hope that we can work out an arrangement with the property owner that shares the parking field, because I think it is a benefit, candidly, to the township, the residents, us, and them, if we have a little area where there's a couple ambulances that are being worked on that are shielded, but I don't have an agreement to that extent standing here tonight, and I want to be straightforward about that. So we were hoping, that was aspirational. How about that as my
That was with
wording?
one of the residents or the property owner next door
The property owner next door.
that owns the big building?
Correct.
Is anybody in that building, or is that building empty? They're still in there, though? Now, you said, or someone said, I think, that something was approved there back in 2000. Is that correct? Do we know what was approved there, Mike?
I think in 2000, it was a parking lot expansion. This second
Can you use the
slide-
mic? You have to use the mic, please. You can remove it. Thank you.
In 2000, was a parking lot expansion to permit the conversion of this use in the building on the right. Yes, this is the plan, and there's a cleaner copy here that was recorded in 2000. Was entitled Parking Lot Expansion, and that was the construction of the parking facility on the subject property, just to give it enough parking spaces to allow this 52,000 to be converted to an office.
So it wasn't approved for something on a building lot?
No.
We're talking about building now.
No, it wasn't approved, but there was a future development hash, which basically was 30,000 square feet, which we've placed our building in, essentially.
At what point did the township own that property? Was that 2000, or was it before that?
I believe it was before then.
Rich, do you remember? You've been around that long.
Yeah, it was earlier, it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was before me, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, and this plan contemplated the development of that as future development, and the parking calculations would show the parking available for both, and that would share them.
And of course, the biggest concern is the residential properties right there.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's, we've actually had some residents at our past meetings, talk about that during public comment. I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm biased with this application,
Of
but
course.
any use that comes in here, I think is going to have to, whether it's us or somebody later, is going to have to take into account the real concerns, the concerns I would have if I lived there about any commercial use. And, I think we've taken steps to show we're sincere about trying our best to address those, but whether it's a shopping center, an office building, an ambulance, sales,
Understood.
there's going to be issues.
Mr. Takita, do you have anything to add? No. Mr. Jones, I'm not sure if he's even with us. No, there he is. Good evening, Mr. Jones. You're muted.
Sorry about my apologies. Nothing to add at this point.
Okay. Is there any public comment needed? Any public comment in person?
Yes, we have 2 public comment online.
Okay,
Bring the first one in.
sure.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Elton Ebersol. I'm a resident on Edgemont Road. Okay, so my first question, again, what are the anticipated environmental impacts and how are they going to be mitigated? Okay, and what I'm talking about, and there has been some discussion tonight already, but we're very concerned about air pollution, ground pollution, and noise pollution. Okay, and when I think of those things, especially the spray booth, okay, does this spray booth have a dust or particle collection system? Okay, I know from being in industry over 50 years, I've actually developed preventive maintenance for these types of equipment, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining these. And is there going to be something like that in a facility like this? Okay, and also the ground pollution from any chemicals, any washing down that goes into like in-house drainage system that might go into a sump. Where's that going to go, and what are the risks of leaving the building, okay, and leaching into our into the ground? Okay, so at the end of the day, okay, the existing civ facility is in an industrial setting. Okay, it's sitting in an industrial setting. Okay, and that's where a facility like this belongs. Okay, it certainly doesn't belong 100 feet from a residential area. We have swimming pools in our backyards. We have gardens and things like that, and basically we just feel as a community here that this isn't something that belongs adjacent to a residential community. Okay. Again, like the air pollution, and especially the ground pollution as well, and the noise pollution, how are these things being mitigated?
Mr. McGinnis, you want to touch on that?
Okay, with respect to the paint booth, and Sergio can give additional details of what was purchased, but again, and I'm an attorney, I'll put caveat, I'm not an expert in this. I'm basically reading drawings and information and parroting it back. What I can do is indicate that the specs that were provided for the paint booth, state-of-the-art industrial brand paint booth, significant investment. It captures 99.84% of the contaminants that result from spraying, and anything that's not captured, I think, rises. You know, it's not something that is going to go into the ground, into any sort of sewage, septic, water system. And we're trying to understand that those concerns exist, so we're willing to go above and beyond and not have that just be, the fire marshal comes through and inspects the building. But we have Sergio has talked with an independent third-party agency that will come out, will coordinate with the township to do annual or semi-annual inspections on our dime. Certainly, I would assume if the residents or the township had a third party that they would prefer come to the site. You know, I'm not going to claim I'm an expert in this field, but my point is we're willing to have somebody who's not associated with Civ Ambulances come out and to make sure that there is not going to be an environmental impact based upon any paint that's utilized at the site. With respect to any cleaning materials, they're not going into I shouldn't be testifying about this, but aren't going to be polluting the groundwater either. It's no different than, an automotive dealership that washes cars, making sure that's filtered out. So those things, again, I without being an expert in it, but in communicating with my client and seeing the efforts that he's made so far, I can at least assure the board and the residents that if we get approval tonight and go through the land development process, we are certainly happy to incorporate any experts that the township or those residents would want to make sure that there's appropriate safeguards in place so that there is no actual threat of any environmental contamination, either from a groundwater or from an air pollutant standpoint. So all I can say is I'm not an expert in it, but we're happy to bring in people who are experts in it to make sure they're not impacted.
Yeah.
Mr. Takita, do we currently regulate body shops and such that do painting? Like, I know there's a couple right next door. There's a body shop right on Lincoln Circle, and Paul Burns Automotive just moved out. They had car painting there. Is that something we regulate?
We regulate them as far as the building code and the fire code are concerned. It does not have anything to do with emissions.
But there's no annual inspections or anything like that of the actual equipment?
On the fire side, no.
Okay.
But we'll do it if requested.
Yeah.
Mr. Ebersol, I think you're muted.
Okay, I'm back, yes. All right, so with all that being said, I want to make sure that I mention OSHA standard part 1910.94, okay? And it talks about exhaust through dust collecting equipment, okay? So I think we should reference that. And also, did I hear mention of actually working on vehicles outside
No.
of the building? No?
There will be no vehicles worked on outside whatsoever. And I will say that I did review this, the paint booth is OSHA compliant.
Okay. Okay. And also the drawing tonight, where the new area where they're going to open up the road wider, that is immediately behind my home and 3 others. And it's bringing, just encroaching further. We would definitely be opposed to that.
The comment I would make about the plan design is to understand that with the conditional use, this is what I will label a sketch plan. We've designed it to show viability, but there's nothing really with this plan that we are absolutely married to. If there's a conversation going forward that the residents don't want a couple-foot expansion and the township's agreeable to that, we're not wedded to that. This is just to show the proof of concept for the use. For land development, this will be very thoroughly designed, reviewed by the township engineer, by the township traffic engineer, and we're happy to include you, your family, and the residents in those discussions.
Okay. And another question, how often are these types of facilities inspected by a regulatory institution?
Never. I mean, we do a fire inspection annually. Right? Is there anything else we do? No, right?
How can we be certain that?
Yeah. It's,
right.
It would be no different than any other body shop or automotive repair facility or car dealership.
And that's why we're making the overture, because we understand the sensitive location, despite this being zone commercial, of the residential impact, to work with the township, the residents, and outside agencies to have inspections more regularly than would otherwise be required.
Yeah, the reason for my question is the residents on the other side of South Old or North Olds Boulevard, they can smell paint when they've walked in that park area over there. They can smell paint. That's why I raised that issue about inspecting their their facility to make sure they're in compliance.
The body shop on the other side of the street that he's referring to.
Yes, that's not right. That's not with our use.
Right. Anything else, Mr. Ebersol?
As a resident, we don't want this.
Yeah, well, just as a resident, that we just don't want this at all, so.
Okay. Understood.
There's too many,
What was that?
right now. Too many concerns that aren't answered or aren't going to be, just felt comfortable about. I mean, mainly the environment, the more research I'm doing, the more concerned I am with the air pollution.
Yeah, you have to identify yourself.
Okay, I'm Mary Ebersol. I spoke with Mike this week. The more research that I'm doing, the more concerned that I am about the air pollution, ground and noise pollution. But particularly the fact that there's nobody inspecting these right now. And yes, they could be the best system, but we could buy the best car. And it breaks and something happens and we have to have it checked. Who's checking this? This is important. And this is a residential area. This
Right.
isn't a, it's not an industrial complex. It's a residential area. We have children, we have infants. It's just not, it isn't suited for a residential area.
Okay, anything else?
No.
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other public comment needed?
Yes, we're bringing him in right now.
Mr. Jones?
We have Tony in the room. She may be muted.
We have Joe Jones on the screen. Hi, Tony.
Hi. Just
Tony,
one
I didn't mean to
question.
cut you off earlier at public comment, but we usually don't take
No, that's okay.
comments on agenda items. I didn't mean to be rude.
That's okay. Not a problem. Earlier, you
Can
talked
you
about.
identify yourself, please, Mrs. Batiste? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Tony Batiste, a resident, Falls Township. You mentioned earlier that there's a 20-foot clearance or an easement adjacent to the residents who are on Edgemont. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the township actually calls for 25. So you're already getting like 5 feet there. But if that's where you're going to need to widen the road, and you said you're going to need to widen it possibly another 10 feet, does that 20 then become 10 feet of clearance between the easement from Edgemont?
I can address that. There's actually 30 feet on the approved plan. There's a 10-foot wide utility easement, and then there's a 20-foot wide buffer area. So there's 30 feet, and the widening that we're proposing is to that 30-foot line. Right now, there's probably 38 feet. So we're looking
Okay.
at 7 or 8 feet, but still leaving 30 feet. And that's broken as a 10-foot utility easement and 20-foot buffer.
Okay, thank you. That was the only question I had.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment needed?
That was the last one.
Any more questions, Mr. Palmer?
No, I'm good for now.
Mr. Galloway?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Mullen?
No question.
Gotta hold it down. You broke it. Oh.
No questions.
Mr. Boraski?
I have a few. How many ambulances do you have currently on site now that are for sale?
I think there's around 35 to 40. They're not all ready right now, but
That's my
they're
question.
in,
How
right,
many-
they're in the process. So there's right around 35 to 40 is my estimate.
How many of them run?
How many of them run? Probably 30.
So they're the ones that are gonna be parked outside in the back lot?
Some of them, yes. So there's about 5, maybe 6 that have been in a front end collision. Those are in the back lot.
Where would they be parked on this lot?
Um,
Grab the microphone if you would, please. Sorry.
So I think the best spot for those would be somewhere right here. But again, that's, yeah.
And one of the comments we made at the planning commission was, honestly, wherever the township and the residents want them parked, we don't care.
I'm just asking some questions right now. I don't know where I want them parked.
Yeah.
So, how many of them, you said there's 35 ambulances approximately right now. How many of them are ready for sale that somebody could come in and buy today?
Ready for sale, I'd say probably around 10 to 15.
Okay. So about half of them. Okay.
And you don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but how many did you sell this quarter?
I don't know 100%, but we sold a bunch.
I guess really what I want to, like, what I'm concerned about is I can feel for the resident. They've probably lived behind what could be used as, it's open space to them, you know, I mean, unfortunately, it is a commercial property. Something has to go there, but I'm nervous that the ambulances are gonna be sitting around, or parts are gonna be sitting around, or it becomes a,
Right,
I don't want
right.
to use the word junkyard, that's not fair.
Right, no, I mean, and I understand, you know, where the residents are coming from. I probably would have the same concerns, you know, if my house was, you know, in a, right next door to a commercial space. You know, it's my intention to do everything possible in earnest, you know, to, you know, make sure that we're doing everything that is needed, you know, that's required by the township to, you know, allow the residents to feel comfortable as well, you know. Where we're at right now, sure, it's industrial, but in my opinion, it's not an industrial business. It's more of a retail business. So if I'm, you know, looking at the, you know, I believe that the zoning code says that an automobile dealer with a body shop and a repair center is allowed. It's my opinion that I feel like that is the type of business that Civ is. It's not on the industrial side. Sure, we do collision repair. Sure, we have a repair center. But the majority of what we do is sales. And we've only done a small portion of collision repair outside work on that side.
By outside, you mean outside of, on the body, not outside? Like
Right, no, I don't mean outside of the
Thank you
building,
for
I mean
clarifying that.
outside collision
almost stopped
repair,
before you.
correct.
Your client's
correct.
making you nervous.
Yes.
While you're on that.
No, we don't do any outside repair work
was my question,
outside
so-
on the lot, no. And there's
that's
no
not repair, but
parts
my
slung
question-
around.
My question about repair is outside repair, meaning other than your ambulances, will you use that body shop to service any other vehicles?
So the majority of what we do right now is no. You know, sure, will we have somebody that may come in for a collision repair? Yes, but we've only had maybe 4 or 5 this entire year. What your ambulances, correct?
So, two things to be clear.
Mike,
You only work on ambulances. This is not, you know, Mr. Boraski drives his automobile here and you're going to work on it. You would only work and sell ambulances here.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm concerned a tractor trailer is going to be in for repair.
No. So that
Just
could,
ambulances.
we would be willing to accept that as a condition, first of all. And second of all, I don't want to speak for Mr. Clark or Mr. Takita, but I do think there could be a condition crafted to address the other concern regarding making sure that ambulances are parked in their parking spaces, that there aren't parts ever to the exterior of or subject to citations, if the board was amenable to that. I think that concern is easily addressed and easily policed. This is not going to be a facility where the township drives by and just sees parts all over the parking lot, and we're willing to agree to that as a condition too.
And then, and it's obvious you guys are looking for road frontage. So I would assume that the tree buffer is gonna be removed along Lincoln Highway?
No, I don't think that's,
It's always been our intention to supplement any buffers, and work with the township and the planning commission with landscaping plans and street trees. I think we have a presence on a corner lot, and we'll still have that presence even if we're planting street trees and landscaping and buffering. Of course, we want to supplement the buffer adjacent to the residences, and you don't want to have, 70-foot wall of evergreens in front of your commercial building either.
No, but clearly we would appreciate it.
But absolutely, on the resident side, we'll supplement the existing buffer, and there is one there, but as I said, there's some spots that could use some additional plantings, and we'll certainly do that. And then along street frontages, we're open to any kind of landscaping the township would desire, typically street trees or more ornamental type stuff, along the roadway. So I think that is something we can work out with the planning commission to their satisfaction.
I mean, I assume this business is more of a destination. People are on their way to the supermarket and see ambulances and stop and buy an
Exactly.
ambulance.
Correct.
It's not drive-by shopping. I mean, you're not gonna have signs in the windows
No.
with the ambulances on sale.
That's why I said the customer parking is irrelevant, because we have 30 spaces earmarked. There will never be a day the entire time this property is operated this way where there's 30 customers that are ever parked here. It's not a thing.
And you said the hours were 8 till 5, Monday through Friday. Are you open weekends?
No.
Never on Saturdays or Sundays.
Sometimes on a Saturday, but usually we're closed Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay. Something that residents need to consider, and we're dealing with the same exact situation over off of Makefield Road, where there's a new business, and they've got some stuff out behind the property where residents are used to being, they're used to nothing being back there, and then all of a sudden somebody's using this business. I'm not saying, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. We can't prevent this site from being developed forever. So, the plan that's in front of us is an 8 till 4 Monday through Friday business. I mean, there's nothing that could prevent I'm not saying a Wawa's going to go there, but a business that's open 24 hours a day, or a gas station or anything like that. I think at one point a Wawa was discussed there, if I'm not mistaken. So, this happened over on West Trenton Avenue next to the post office when nobody wanted that developed. They didn't want this, they didn't want that. And finally we were told, listen, you have to let them develop their site. Is that correct, Mr. Clark? We had been in front of a judge several times about that.
That is correct.
And it's now townhouses. So that's something that residents have to consider. Like, I know that you're used to nothing being there and you like that, but it's a commercial property that, that's something you need to take into consideration. So with that, are there any other questions from board members? Mr. Brasky?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mike, more to Joe. I was just curious on the conditional use hearing. If we set the standards and the conditions now, they are attached, I probably always ask this, but are they attached to the business or to the property?
They'll be attached to the property.
What kind of conditions are we talking about?
Well, I think we're talking about all the standards that are already listed in our ordinance, and during this hearing, Mr. McGinnis has agreed to a few others, which will be added to the conditional use approval if the board were to approve it. And that is the no outside storage of parts, no outside repairs. The hours would be 8 to 5, Monday through Saturday. And there have been one or two others I was making notes that Mr. McGinnis has indicated they would agree to, and that would be made in addition to the conditions. And as Mr. McGinnis has pointed out, this is the conditional use phase. If you approve this, they still have to come back for the land development phase, where there will be other aspects of this, more dealing with the buffers and things along those lines, that we will deal with during land development.
Is it fair for the Board of Supervisors to limit the amount of operational and non-operational ambulances that they could store on site?
It could be a.
I mean, I want to see you be successful, don't get me wrong,
Right.
I don't want.
If you have a number in mind, I would suggest that we mention that to Mr. McGinnis and his client at this point in time, so they agree to it. With a conditional use hearing like this, we are somewhat limited to the conditions that are in the ordinance.
Okay.
But Mr. McGinnis is agreeing on behalf of his client to some additional conditions. And if you want to say you can't have more than 10 non-operational vehicles, no more than 30 or 40 total. If you want to make that condition, then I would suggest that you make that, ask the applicant if they would be willing to agree to that.
Let me ask you this question. Is there a process where you go over the ambulance that comes in and you buy it? Obviously, you're probably buying something you know you can move, right? I mean, you're not going to buy something that is total junk, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah, the majority of the stuff that, or the vehicles that we have purchased, they run and they move.
So you're looking, there's minor damage or light bars broke or whatever else, and
Right, that's the majority, correct. Yeah.
so you're trying to move
Suppose,
product.
suppose
Exactly.
Right.
I buy an ambulance from you, and then I crash my ambulance in the middle of the night. Is that ever a situation where somebody's going to come drop off with a tow truck and an ambulance?
In 4 years, that hasn't happened.
Okay. We had, when Gray Bar Lumber closed down the street here, someone bought it and they opened a auto repair and tow facility. And we put all kinds of restrictions on them. We told them, we actually made them paint a line in the parking lot and says, you know, after 7 p.m. you can't tow anything beyond that point. Is that correct? We did that, right?
That is correct.
And
There
then when
were
they sold
residential
cars,
properties
we
in
put a
that.
number, you know, you can't have more than 12 vehicles for sale. Is that correct as well?
I don't remember the.
I don't remember the
exact we did,
number, but-
yes, we did place those conditions and the applicant agreed to it.
Yeah, and not to add additional conditions that aren't being suggested, but one of the things that, again, we suggested is during the pendency of the land development process, we're happy to come to a mutually acceptable arrangement about some third-party inspector site as a condition of approval too, because we do take the environmental concerns very seriously. And we think that by the time we come through for land use, if there's, we have documentation that we can provide that might make everybody feel better that this is not just us selling a hope and a dream or bait and switch. We're very serious about that, so we're willing to attach that as a condition as well. And I think it's clear with your conditional use ordinance, you're permitted to attach any reasonable conditions that are agreeable, so.
So, I went on Google Earth and Googled your current location, and I don't know how old the picture is, but it didn't paint a very pretty picture. It looked like, I mean, I'm not gonna say it was a mess, but it didn't, you know, it looked like there was a bunch of ambulances out back.
Sure. So we're limited to what we could do right now in our current place. That is not the vision for Civ. And moving to this new facility, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're going to do. So there's some, ambulances parked in the back if you look on Google Earth, correct? Yeah. And that is pretty old. Yeah. So that's our vision right here.
So, the fact, the biggest concern for me, and probably for all of us, is the residents that are right next door. So I said that earlier, and I'm gonna say that again. That's the big one. So if this was approved tonight, you still have a long way to go with those residences to make sure that, you're all on the same page and that they're comfortable so as they can
Sure.
be with what's gonna happen there. But something, if they're watching tonight, and I hope they are, they have to really consider that, this might be a better option than what might come down the road there. I mean, business is booming in Falls right now. People are looking for property all up and down Lincoln Highway. So, this is an 8 to 5 business Monday through Friday. As much as the environmental concerns are legitimate and real, modern day paint booths aren't like they were even 10 years ago with the amount of exhaust and fumes. I'm not sure what paint booths they're smelling when they're over by Von Hoffman Park. But, I don't know I can't picture the closest body shop to there. So, are there any other questions from board members? Mr. Boraski?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Ms. Mullen?
No.
Mr. Galloway or Boraski?
No.
I almost said it wrong.
No.
All right, is there a motion?
Hold on, I got one question. Our local ambulance that service our community, means you're moving in, is there any preferences for service possibly that you can do to help them out, because you're coming within our community?
Yeah, sure, definitely. That's what we're here to do. I mean, here recently we serviced Newtown Ambulance Squad. We service, acute care, health fleet, and we would help to service you as well.
The Baraski Intense Ambulance Company.
That's all.
Is that it? All right, is there a motion to approve or deny?
I'll make the motion to deny.
Is there a second? Is there a motion to approve?
Well, procedurally, we have a motion to deny, made by Mr. Galloway. Is there a second to that motion? Seeing no second, that motion fails for lack of a second. Now it would be appropriate to ask for a motion to approve.
Is there another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
And Mr. Dents, before you call for a vote, so Mr. McGinnis, in addition to the conditions that are laid out in the ordinance, as we said, we've discussed multiple conditions this evening, and your client is agreeing to all of those conditions that we've discussed, including no outside storage of parts, no outside repairs, hours of operation, a third-party inspector, and whatever else we discussed and agreed to.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No. No.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Congratulations.
So
Good
you will
job.
be back, this isn't done.
This
This
is the
isn't a
very
done deal
first-
to the residents. This is just the plan is concept. All right. Item number 3, Stalwart Morrisville LLC minor subdivision lot line change.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Rob Dunlock, attorney for the applicant. Here with me tonight is Mark Lagola. Mark is the Senior Vice President of the Northeast Region for Logistics Property Company, and Eric Moser. Eric is the property manager who will be working on this property. We're here tonight for a very limited purpose, and that is to request approval for a lot line change application.
Oh.
Check,
Sorry.
check.
That's okay. Yep, go ahead. There we go. Should have noticed that. So, Mr. Chairman, we're here for a very limited purpose, and that's for a lot line change application. There are absolutely no improvements whatsoever being proposed by this application. This application involves moving approximately 10.921 acres from one property to another property by moving the lot line over. And we have submitted the plans. We received comments from the township engineer. We revised those plans. We resubmitted them back. The township engineer's letter had 2 comments on them, one concerning monuments, which we agreed to, and a second concerning labeling a stormwater easement, which we've agreed to. We've since revised the plan and submitted back to the township engineer. All's a full will comply, all in order, and we'd ask you to consider the grant of lot line change plan approval tonight so that we can move forward and record those plans and then have a closing with the owners of the RFC property.
Okay. Any questions from board members? Mr. Boraski? No questions. Ms. Mullen?
I just want to know why you have to move it. Why you are seeking to move it, I'm sorry.
Okay, good question. RFC is an existing manufacturing plant you have on Post Road, is it? Post Avenue,
Yes,
Post
Post
Road?
Road.
Post Road. And they have excess land. They have 20 acres. They don't need the full 20 acres. And so they're offering to sell 10 of their 20 acres to the neighbor, and then the neighbor will incorporate it into their project. In this case, it's predominantly the land on the side of their building towards the river. And the applicant intends to use that land to build a secondary access, not for trucks, either for cars or emergency access, to Post Road down there. There's also a railroad siding in that area that's not used by RFC that may be used in the future by the adjacent property owner. So it's land that they don't need, and so they are selling it for what they consider to be a very fair price, and they're going to take those funds and put it back into their business.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
Mr. Palmer?
Pretty straightforward.
Yes, straightforward. Mr. Jones, do you have anything to add?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Real quick, for what are the purpose of monuments and why do we care about them?
For me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Well, they demarc out the property, so if you own, if it was a residential lot, and you didn't have any property corners set, someone could build a fence, it could be, an encroachment onto your property, but we asked the applicants to set the monument so that we can retrace that property line exactly in case there's any kind of future infringements or encroachments.
Okay, thank you. That question arose, that's the reason I'm asking. Do you have anything to add, Mr. Clark or Mr. Takita?
No, this is pretty simple and straightforward.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to leave, if we can, with the township manager, the signed plans for him to circulate accordingly for your signature and the township engineer's signature. When they're ready, we'll pick them up and record them or bring copies back to the township.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clark, I just realized we never called a roll tonight.
I didn't even catch that, Mr. Dents.
And we didn't close the conditional use hearing.
That I didn't catch either. You can tell Ms. Gallagher isn't sitting next to me telling me what to do.
Should we call the roll now?
I don't think we need to call the roll. All
Everyone's
5
here.
board members are present. You
Yes.
have mentioned
Okay.
their names multiple times, and I think
Here we are at agenda item 4, I just remembered.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Good job.
Braski reminded me. Item number 4, Mission Barbecue, Oxford Valley, PA. Allocation of space. Is there anyone here for Mission Barbecue?
Good evening. This is Roger Sullivan. I am General Counsel for Mission Barbecue. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. We're here this evening in the waiting room or gone live, I'm not sure which. We have Franco DeAndre, who is our general contractor, Tony DiPrinzio, also our general contractor, Alan Ham, who is our national architect and the architect for this location, and Kevin Cross, who is our regional director of operations to include the Pennsylvania area. This matter comes before the board on Mission Barbecue's application for a waiver of final land development plan. We are in receipt of a November 16th letter from the township engineer, Mr. Jones, with a dozen 18 recommendations. Our team has been in close contact with Mr. Jones since that letter. Yes.
I coughed, I'm sorry. Go ahead, proceed.
Sure. As I said, we were in receipt of Mr. Jones' letter with a number of requested adjustments to be made to the plan. We've stayed in close contact with his office since that time. We are in a position to make all of the requested adjustments and other changes to the plan that Mr. Jones has requested, so much so that earlier today, draft resolutions were forwarded to my office. We have already gone through them, have received confirmation from Mission Barbecue ownership, and those draft resolutions have already been signed and sent back to Mr. Jones. It is a limited request. This is the Pier 1, the abandoned Pier 1 at the Court at Oxford Valley Shopping Center. It's sort of in the out parcel, if you will, sandwiched between Commerce Boulevard and Oxford Valley Road. The necessity for the request is that we are splitting the building in two. Mission Barbecue will be in one half, approximately one half, about 49.5%. And an as yet unidentified retailer will go into the other half. But that unidentified retailer we have not secured that subtenant just yet. And that's what has driven the request for the waiver of final land development plan. To my eye, and as far as I'm aware, all of the, apologies, there's ambulance going by my office, if you could hear that. That's what has requested, that's what generated the request. So to my eye, everything is in place and has been addressed, but we are happy to take questions and answer them if the board has any.
I'm sure we have a couple. Mr. Boraski, any questions or comments?
I only want to know when they're going to open it. I have no questions.
Well, we actually have an answer for you. Our anticipated opening date is July of this coming year. July of 22 is the estimated opening date.
Wonderful. Have a good night.
Ms. Mullen?
Thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Galloway? You're muted, bud.
Sorry about that. I thought it was a siren by my house, so
I did the same thing. I was looking outside.
I'm looking forward to it. No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, the only question I have is there going to be, so the people at home know, a drive-through option with this, or is it just going to be walk-in?
No, sir. Mission Barbecue does not have a drive-through option at any location. There will not be a drive-through option at this location. It'll be walk-in, takeout, and dine-in only.
And for those, is that it, Mr. Palmer?
No, I'm just talking about like possible curbside pickup for people with social distancing regards.
Yes, sir. We do offer curbside pickup for this particular location. I believe we have 4. That's our standard package, either 3 or 4 curbside pickup. And we do that at all our locations. This one will be no different. So for social distancing and for customer convenience, we will have dedicated customer pickup locations outside, and they'll be marked as such.
Thank you.
All right, and then for those watching at home, this is on Oxford Valley Road, the old Pier 1 Imports. The building's being split in 2. Half of it's going to be a Mission Barbecue. They are going to have some outside seating. That pretty much sums it up, right? Is there any public comment needed? I don't see anyone here.
We have no public comment.
All right. Mr. Jones, do you have anything to add?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clark or Mr. Takita?
No, this is also very simple and straightforward.
We should probably make a road trip down to a Mission Barbecue and check it out before this one opens. All right?
Is
We
one
would love to have you.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you and good luck.
Thank you. Good night.
Hold on. I'm a little bit out of order. What's item number 5? I don't have item number 5. Consider an indemnification and hold harmless agreement between KA Fairless Hills LP and Falls Township. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Dent. This is for the Wawa that the board has previously approved. They have all of their approvals in place, and they are just waiting on getting their final planning module approval from DEP. Because they have to go through a full planning module, that's going to take some time, and they want to begin construction on the Wawa as soon as they can. Normally, we do not allow someone to begin getting all of their permits until they have all of their approvals and all of the necessary approvals they need from outside agencies. But they have requested to be able to move forward. And essentially, the agreement that you have in front of you is that we're going to allow them to move forward and begin construction. But if for whatever reason they don't get their DEP approvals, or for whatever reason, if this takes a year or 2 years or 3 years to get their DEP approvals, the township is indemnified from allowing them to begin this project. So essentially what this is we're letting them begin work, but they're doing it at their own risk. And we've done this in the past with some other businesses, because as you're aware, DEP, because of some hydraulic overloads in the Neshaminy Interceptor, makes you go through a full planning module and not just the waiver.
All right, any questions from board members? Mr. Boraski?
No.
Ms. Mullen?
No questions.
Mr. Palmer?
No question.
Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
I have no questions. So do you have anything to add, Mr. Jones?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any public comment needed?
No public comment.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve. I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Item number 6, consider adopting the 2022 budget and resolution establishing the millage rate for 2022. Mr. Clark? We're adopting the budget tonight is basically what we're doing here. We saw our budget presentation at our last meeting. Mrs. Rukoff is here for any questions. Any questions from board members, Mr. Boraski?
Okay.
Ms. Mullen?
Ms. Rukoff answered all of my questions
Right.
already.
Mr. Palmer?
No, I already had all my questions answered.
Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
Okay. The way this works is, we individually meet with Mr. Takita and Mrs. Rukoff, our finance director, and go over the budget, before we get to this point. So it's not like yesterday we decided to start calling her. So this has been a long process. Is there any public comment needed?
No public comment.
All right. So this is Resolution 2021-36. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Mr. Galloway, can you poll the board?
Yes. Mr. Boraski?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen?
Yes.
Mr. Dents?
Yes.
And I am a yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Rukoff. That was easy, right?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
All right. Item 7, consider awarding workers' compensation contract for the year 2022. We're actually saving about $15,000 this year, or in 2022. Mrs. Vaughn is here from Vaughn Insurance if we have any questions. Mr. Boraski?
No questions.
Ms. Mullen? I keep wanting to say Ms. Gallagher. I apologize.
That's okay, no questions.
Mr. Palmer?
Now I'm excited about the rate this year.
Really? I'm excited about Mission Barbecue. Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
Any
And
public comment needed?
You could buy a lot of sandwiches with that 15,000.
No public comment.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Mr. Galloway, can you poll the board, please?
Yes. John Palmer?
Yes.
Aaron Mullen?
Yes.
Jeff Boraski?
Yes.
Jeffrey Dents?
Yes.
And I am a yes.
Thank you. All right. Item 8, consider adopting ordinance amending the zoning map, including as part of the township zoning ordinance. Mr. Takita or Mr. Clark, one of you, tell us what we're doing here and why we're doing it.
The board's being asked to consider amending the zoning ordinance and the zoning map for 3 parcels in the North Point development area. They're currently zoned MPM, which is Materials Processing and Manufacturing, and the request is to rezone them to sanitary landfill.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
No.
No.
Mr. Palmer? Mr. Galloway?
None.
For those that don't know, this is down inside the old steel mill site at the end of Tyburn Road. Is there any public comment needed?
No public comment.
All right. Is there a motion to approve ordinance 2021-16?
So moved.
Okay. Motion
Seconded.
made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Item 9, I feel like we've done this about half a dozen times this year, is consider adopting ordinance repealing ordinance 2021-13 and reinstating ordinance 2007-3 records as amended. This is ordinance 2021-17. Are there any comments needed from board members? We've all been through this. Ms. Mullen?
No comments.
Mr. Palmer?
No.
Mr. Galloway?
None.
Is there any public comment needed?
No public comment.
Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Item 10, consider adopting ordinance amending Chapter 180 recycling to prohibit the burning of recyclable material. This is basically, saying that you can't burn, either in your fire pit or your chimney. It's basically metal and plastic and magazines and stuff that you shouldn't be burning anyway. Correct? Does that pretty much sum it up? Any questions from board members? Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure this doesn't violate waste management's operation.
No, that's actually in there, I'm sorry. Yeah, it actually says in there, this shall not apply to any solid waste or waste-to-energy facility operating lawfully within the Resource Recovery District. Thank you, Mr. Palmer, for cleaning that out. Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
All right, this is ordinance 2021-18. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Item 11, consider awarding bids for provisions of cleaning services for Falls Township Municipal Building and various parks. We have 2 bids, is that correct, Mr. Takita? CNS Cleaning Company, $64,270, and Golden Building Maintenance for $45,640. They're not qualified though, is that correct?
That's correct. Their submission was
bid.
defective.
All right, so CNS Cleaning is who's been doing it for a while now anyhow, right? And they've been doing a good job?
Yes.
All right, is there any questions from board members? Mr. Boraski?
I was just curious what the rates were. Is this for 1 year?
Yes. And it's the same as it was last year.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
That's all.
Ms.
No
Muller?
questions.
Mr. Galloway?
No question.
Mr. Palmer?
No question.
All right. Any board comment needed?
No public comment.
All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
All right, I'll second the motion. The motion made and seconded. Mr. Galloway, can you poll the board, please?
Yes. Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Ms. Mullen.
Yes.
Mr. Dance.
Yes.
Mr. Brafke.
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
All right. Item 12, consider escrow release requests. Can we do all these at once, Mr. Clark?
You can, they should just be mentioned
All right,
individually.
we have
And-
Air Gas, 51 Middle Drive for $76,316.20. We have MM Metals USA LLC, 53 Middle Drive for $54,771.80. And JG Petrucci Tract, 85 Ben Fairless Drive, $3,520,532.72. So this isn't money that's the township's money. This is money that we've been holding in escrow from these developers. So we're not actually spending our money on this. Any questions from board members or comments? Mr. Boraski?
No
Ms.
questions.
Mullen? Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, I have one. Mr. Jones, are you okay with releasing all these escrows?
Yes, Mr. Palmer, the work is done to our satisfaction, and both projects have been substantially complete for quite some time. We are holding a retainage on each of those projects, one of them to get full grass germination, and the other one, we're still reviewing the as-built for the stormwater management system, but we are comfortable.
Thank you.
Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion. Second it.
All right, can you pull the board, Mr. Galloway?
Yes. John Palmer.
Yes.
Aaron Mullen.
Yes.
Jeff Brasky.
Yes.
Jeffrey Dance.
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
All right, that takes us to item number 13, the minutes for November 15th, 2021. Any comments or corrections needed? Excellent minutes as always, Mrs. Pullen. Even though she's not here, I know she's watching. No? Anyone?
No.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? None. Okay, takes us to the engineer's report. It's all you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can see for the new land development submitted in the month of November, we had Mission Barbecue, which you adjudicated tonight, and Britain Industries. The Britain Industries project is a waiver of land development to reconstruct their facility, which recently had a fire hazard developed, and they lost some of their space. In terms of the earth disturbance, we had one residential earth disturbance submitted and 3 cell tower projects submitted in November. In terms of the updates that are in red, I'll be brief. The updated red text indicates that Stalwart, North Point KTC Port Strip, those are items that you dealt with tonight, as well as the SIV ambulances. North Point Phase 2, Buildings 4, 5, and 6 received a recommendation from the Planning Commission last month. They will not be before the board until February. They have a fair amount of cleanup work to do, and we're going to work with the applicant's engineer to establish the road construct based on the overall development agreement. Mission Barbecue, again, they appeared tonight, and the Britain Industries project will be before the Planning Commission next week. They're on a tight timeline to try to get up and operational. In terms of the earth disturbances, the Calamar Properties is a stone laydown field next to Premium Lift down off of Old 13. You probably recall that project. That sat in limbo for a while because they had an issue with their NPDES application. That's resolved itself, and so now we're in the process of reviewing that as an earth disturbance. And the 3 other red highlighted earth disturbances were recommended for approval for issuance of an earth disturbance permit, including the drive-through at the Burger King. In terms of the township projects, the road program is rolling similar to what was done last month. They're working on drainage, curbs, and they're working in sections in Elderberry. And we are ready to go out to bid on the Pinewood project. We're just in the final stages of quality assurance and quality control on the plan set. That's my update.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Jones, Mr. Boraski?
No questions.
Ms. Mullen?
No.
Mr. Palmer?
No question.
Mr. Galloway?
No questions.
And I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Jones. That takes us to the bill list. That's a $2,099,000, $2,099,117.10. Most of that's paid, all over $1.1 million of that. Some of the other highlights, there's a lot of escrows, $85,000. We bought new watch guard cameras for the police vehicles. That's a big purchase. That's $90,000. We had some repairs done to traffic signals. They're the highlights, basically. Any questions or comments from board members? Is your mic on? Yeah. No. Now it is. I'm sorry. Any questions or comments from board members, Mr. Boraski?
No.
Ms. Mullen?
No.
Mr. Galloway?
No.
Mr. Palmer?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Mr. Galloway, can you pull the board?
Yes. John Palmer.
Yes.
Aaron Mullen.
Yes.
Jeffrey Brasky.
Yes.
Jeffrey Dents.
Yes.
And I am a yes.
All right, thank you. That takes us to our executive session. Mr. Clark?
Yes, Mr. Dents, prior to the meeting this evening, the board held an executive session to discuss personnel, a matter of litigation, and a matter involving a collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to our police department report. Chief Whitney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, you have my written report. I'll just kind of hit the highlights. This is brief this month. In the month of November, we had 1,657 calls for service, which by the end of the month brought us to 18,686 calls year to date. I took note today as I was preparing my report for the board that we just cleared 20,000 calls for service earlier today. So with 2 weeks left in the year, we'll probably add another 800 or so to that. Of those calls in November, 6 were overdoses, which brought us to 72 by the end of November. And 108 were car crashes, which brought us to 1,058 year-to-date at that point. The highlighted calls for service in your report really all ended up being traffic pursuits. There were 6, and there was actually one earlier today that didn't make it to your report, so there were 7 since our last township meeting. Most of them were discontinued by the police. Several did end up resulting in arrests, including the one that took place around 3:30 in the afternoon today. It was a retail theft from Home Depot. Today, our Human Services co-responder program started. Our co-responder is named Kara Gadzinski. Kara has a background of social work service with Children and Youth Services of Bucks County, so she has a good deal of experience that she brings to that program. That's the program that we share with Middletown Township, and the co-responders respond mainly to and follow up mainly on calls that deal with mental health issues and domestic violence issues. And the only thing I have other than that is to wish everybody here and watching at home a safe and happy holiday season.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Whitney?
No.
Ms. Mullen?
No, thank you.
Mr. Palmer? Or?
Yeah, one fast. Chief, is there a possible venue you can set up, maybe like a roundtable discussion or something, and introduce our new co-responder to the community, maybe like coffee with the chief type of venue?
You know, we were talking about doing a video and asking the township to put a link on the township website.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think when COVID dies down in the community, we'll be happy to kind of hold an event. We can hold a virtual event, but we're planning on doing a video in January.
That works. Thank you.
Mr. Galloway?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Whitney.
Thank you.
That takes us to manager comment.
I have one item for the board and for the public. Christmas trees will be picked up for composting on Saturday, January 8th and Saturday, January 15th by Waste Management. Please do not put trees out for pickup prior to the January 8th composting collection date, and any Christmas tree over 6 feet or excessively large must be cut in half. Additional details will be posted on social media and on the website.
See, I just fold mine up and put it back in the basement. Any board comment, Mr. Palmer?
I'd just like to wish everybody a happy holiday and a safe one. And let's turn the page to the new year.
All right, thank you, Mr. Galloway.
Just a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mullen?
No comment. Happy holidays.
Mr. Boraski?
No, thank you, Mr. Dennis.
All right, and I'm going to echo everyone else and wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a happy and safe New Year. I look forward to another great year in 2022. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.